Blog Talk Radio.
Me chiamo apura kanu apurai kaitnut ne ye EGUA da me dinde Odwirafo Kwesi Nehem Ptah Akhan Akwamumai Amaruka Etipi mu Odwirafo Odwiramai mu. Greetings to all Apurai Kani Apurai Kaiti people, meaning Africans, Black people. Today is EGUA Day, Marketplace Day. My name is Odwirafo Kwesi Nehem Ptah Akhan. Odwirafo Biakwamu Nation in North America within Odwirama, the purified nation, Apurai Kani Apurai Kaiti people in the Western Hemisphere. Yet I say we thank you once again for tuning into the broadcast. We're opening up the chat room. If you have any questions or comments, you'd like to interact in the chat room, you must log in as a user in order to interact. If you have any questions or comments on the phone line, simply hit the number 1 so that we can see that your hand is raised and we can connect. We have 4 broadcasts on a weekly basis. We have Akhan Nanasom, Ancient Authentic Akhan Ancestral Religion, on Joda Monday nights, where we deal specifically with the Akhan expression of ancestral religion, first and foremost because we are Akhan, secondly because of the misinformation being propagated regarding Akhan cosmology, culture, ritual practice, and so forth by individuals not only in the Western Hemisphere, but also individuals on the continent of Apurai Kai who have been infected with Christianity, Islam, the various fake pseudo-religions, as well as white culture in general, and those infections have informed and polluted their presentation of Akhan ancestral religion. So we deal with ancient, authentic Akhan ancestral religion, which deals with our ancestral origins in ancient Kanat, the Khan land, the first land, foremost land, the land of our origins. That is a title of ancient Nubia. Some of our people migrated from ancient Kanat to the western part of the continent a couple of thousand years ago after the fall of KAMIT and northern Kanat, and reestablished the Kanat Empire, the Nubian Empire, the Empire of Ghana. About 1,000 years later, some of our people migrated further south towards the forest belt and savanna regions, in the regions of contemporary Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, and Ghana, and reestablished Akhan civilization in those regions. Hundreds of years later, some of us were forced into the Western Hemisphere from those regions to North, Central, South America, the Caribbean, and Europe during the Musuo Kesie, the Great Perversity, the enslavement era. This is how we ended up in the Western Hemisphere. However, we maintained our ancestral religious traditions. Thus, the Akhan tradition in Suriname in South America is called Winti, from the Akhan term Quinti. It is called Obia in Jamaica, from the Akhan term Obai. In North America, in the United States, the Akhan ancestral religion is called Hoodoo, from the Akhan term Undu, meaning medicines from roots, trees, plant life. It also means to become heavy with the spirit through spirit possession, spirit communication, and so forth. We also refer to the tradition, the Hoodoo tradition, as the conjure tradition, which comes from the Akhan term Kanche, which means to utter incantations to bring the spirits forward, the spirits of the Abosom and Nananom Nsamanfo, the deities, and our spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors. So this is what we deal with on Joda Monday nights. On Benada, Abenada Tuesday nights, we have Ojira, which means purification. In that broadcast, we deal with ancestral religion in general, not just the Akhan expression, but ancestral religion in general, and how it impacts the lives of every Apurai Kani Apurai Kaiti person, African Black person, wherever we exist in the world, no matter what form our ancestral religious practice takes. Ancestral religion, in essence, is the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance. That means through ritual, we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to incorporate in order to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order. And through ritual, we reject those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to reject in order to restore balance to our thoughts, intentions, and actions, and thus realign ourselves with divine order. So the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance, these are the expansive and contractive poles of ancestral religion. We state that Ojida, purification, operationalizes Nanason. Purification operationalizes Afurakani, the African ancestral religion. We seek to align every thought, intention, and action with divine order every moment of every day. That is our ancestral culture. We are the divine acceptance, the law, the love of order, and the divine rejection, hatred of disorder and its purveyors. That is our way of life as Afurakani people. When we seek to execute our function in creation as cells within the great divine body of creation of the Supreme Being, the Great Mother and Great Father, Nyamewa, Aminet, Amen, the Great Mother and Great Father who comprise the Supreme Being. We are cells within that great divine body. We have a function to execute, so we seek to execute that divine function. When we make legitimate mistakes, we seek to engage the ritual process to ritually incorporate divine law and ritually restore divine balance so that we can realign ourselves with order and continue to execute our function within creation. We seek to align every thought, intention, and action with divine order every moment of every day. And through that ritual process, we can maintain that culture or way of life. This is how ancestral religion impacts every aspect of our lives, moment to moment, day to day, and continuously. So we deal with Ojida, purification of concepts, culture, cosmology, ritual practice, and so forth on the Ojida broadcast. On Yauda, which is Thursday, Yada, Abada, Thursdays, we have Amain Sim, affairs of the nation. We deal with specific issues confronting us as Afurakani people in the Western Hemisphere as a unique Omain, as a unique nation in the Western Hemisphere. We call Ojida Mind, the purified Ojida Omain nation, mind, land of the west, the setting sun. So Ojida Mind is the purified nation, Afurakanu, in the Western Hemisphere. Because we were forced into this hemisphere, at some point we held on to our ancestral traditions, of course, and at some point we were directed by our ancestresses and ancestors to coalesce in a specific region of the Western Hemisphere, a specific region of the Earth Mother's body. We coalesced in that region, drawn together, blended ancestral blood circles, interface with the unique expression of the Earth Mother divinities within this region of their body in the Western Hemisphere, interface with plant life, animal life, mineral life, food as well as medicine from this region, interface with the unique expression of the Abosom, the Orisha, the Vodou, the Deities, the NTORO, the forces in nature as they manifest in this region. And through that process, inclusive of that blending of ancestral blood circles and allowing ancestresses and ancestors to return through this blending of ancestral blood circles in this unique region, we have forged a locative identity, unique expression of Afurakani culture and ancestral religion born of the reality as we interface in this region of the Earth Mother's body. So therefore, we have a unique approach to solving our issues, and we approach our issues from an Amaniye perspective, a nationist perspective. We talk about Amaniye and nationism as the purification of nationalism, a proper understanding of what a nation is, what an Omain is, which is Omain is an organal structure. An Omain is a living, breathing entity governed by specific Abosom forces in creation. We are cells within that organal structure. So we interface with one another. We are interdependent upon one another as Afurakani people, as well as plant life, animal life, mineral life, and so forth, as cells within this organ structure. But we also recognize that there are Abosom, Orisha, Vodou that govern that organal structure. And when we function, we not only serve to execute our own individual functions and interdependent functions with other cells within the organ, but also the organ itself and the deities that govern that organ. We have a unique understanding, a proper understanding, a holistic understanding of what an Omain, a nation is. Thus, we deal with Amaniye, nationism, the purification of nationalism, a holistic approach to Amain Setsu, or nation building restoration. So we deal with that on Yauda Thursday nights. Tonight is Awukuda or Akuada, which is Wednesday. We have EGUA, which is Marketplace Day. We do a couple of things. We showcase Afro-Kaini businesses, organizations, and institutions who are serving our community, those who maintain their ancestral religious values, and therefore those values inform their service to the community, positively impacting our community and so forth. We also deal with the philosophical foundation to economic development rooted in our ancestral religious values, and thus a holistic approach to economic development. So we have published our OCOM economic development model, which is an approach, of course, to economic development rooted in our ancestral religious values. You can download that model for free on our OCOM economic development model page. So tonight is one of those broadcasts where we deal with the philosophical foundation of economic development and how we distribute resources within the Afro-Kaini, Oman, Ojiraman, the purified nation, Afro-Kaini people in the Western Hemisphere. And once again, an Oman is a unique organal structure. It is an entity, a living, breathing entity. That's what a nation is, governed by specific Abosom forces in creation that regulate the nation itself and the cells that comprise that organ, which is us. So we're governed by forces in creation. So we want to talk about a specific combination or union of forces in creation that have to do with restoration, renewal, and so forth. That's spiritual renewal, spiritual restoration, but also the restoration of the Oman, the renewal of the Oman, and so forth. And that is part of that distribution of resources that includes economic development and so forth. So we want to talk about Sobek and AUSAR MEHI, these two divinities, the etymology and cosmology of quote-unquote baptism. It's dealing with ritual submergence for initiation, purification, and renewal. The whites and their offspring later would corrupt that into baptism, which comes from their pseudo-religious practices, which are always corrupted fragments, less than 0.1% of our culture. So these foolish, corrupted fragments like Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hebrewism, Hinduism, Taoism, Buddhism, Jainism, pseudo-esotericism, Hermeticism, all these different Sufism, Kabbalism, Gnosticism, all of these foolish practices, pseudo-Native Americanism, all of these foolish practices that have no basis or foundation in real cosmology or real ritual practice. We've exposed that in our publication, Kukutumtum, the Ancestral Jurisdiction. But one of those corruptions is this notion of baptism. This foolish notion coming from, on one hand, Christianity and the fictional cartoon character Jesus who never existed being, quote-unquote, baptized by the fictional cartoon character John the Baptist. It's related to the foolish ablutions of the so-called Jewish tradition, talking about ritual purification and bathing and so forth. Of course, the whites and their offspring emerging from northern Europe as savages, invading southern Europe and North Africa in the Near East. Those areas were populated by our people. These savages had no knowledge of ritual purification. Of course, they cannot communicate with the deities. These criminals were engaged in dissexuality and all manner of perversions. They were not engaged in any form of ritual purification, aligning themselves with any deities, because as spirits of disorder, incarnating as spirits of disorder without exception, the whites and their offspring have no capacity to communicate with the deities, the forces in creation. The Abosom, the forces in creation, do not communicate with the whites and their offspring. They are the cancerous cells within the body of black humanity. And just like the cancerous cells that develop within our bodies are isolated by our immune and lymphatic systems, destroyed, killed, and expelled from the body, the whites and their offspring are no different. They are the cancerous cells within the body of black humanity who have degenerated and become disfigured, and they are slated for eradication, extermination. Not union, not an embrace, not fusion, but extermination without exception. That includes white Europeans, white Americans, white Hindus, white Asians, white Arabs, white Hispanics, Latinos, white pseudo-Native Americans, all of these non-black individuals are cancerous cells who incarnate as spirits of disorder. They incarnate without a ka or kaet, the soul, the divinity that dwells in the head region of Afro-Kaini people only. They are directly akin and literally the cancerous cells within the body of creation. This is why they seek to consume and destroy all other healthy cells that are in their path. No different than cancerous cells. If their development is not arrested, they will consume and destroy every cell in their path until they take over the entire organism, the entire body. In the same fashion, the whites and offspring have spread out from northern Eurasia to every population where we existed on Earth in ancient times and even to this moment, seeking to consume and destroy every Afro-Kaini civilization wherever we exist in the world, and they have operated nonstop wherever they could, especially over the past couple of 100 years. So these are the spirits of disorder. They promoted this corruption of our ancestral traditions. One of these corruptions is this notion of baptism. So we're going to talk about, and we're going to go to our publication, KAMIT, HENA, NTORO, the Black Nation and Divinity. We'll put a link to that book. This is one of our 29 books. Of course, the ebook versions of our publications are free downloads from our website. And then we have the softcover versions as well. And we're going to go to page, in that particular publication, scroll up right quick. We're going to go to page 13 of that publication. KAMIT, HENA, NTORO, the Black Nation and Divinity. But first and foremost, when we're talking about Sobek and Ausar MEHI, Sobek is the crocodile, major crocodile divinity, a force in creation who utilizes the crocodile as a sacred Achinebois animal totem in creation and so forth, operating through the great river and so forth. So this is an expansive force within the river divinity locale or shrine. This expansive force, Sobek, utilizes the crocodile as a sacred Achinebois animal totem. It's a powerful force. Then, of course, we have Ausar, and we're going to get into that information. But the key here is, first and foremost, there's a title of Ausar where he's called Mehi. Mehi. Sometimes Mahi or Mehi, from the root meh. Now, when we look at the root of the term meh or ma, different dialectical pronunciations, what does that terminology mean? If you look at the term meh, or sometimes pronounced ma, in ancient Kemet, on one hand it can mean full, to be full, filled, but then related to that, it also means north, like in the northern portion of the country. Met can be the north, and Resi can be the south. Shema can also be the south. Meh or Mehi means northern, from the root meh, meaning north. But meh also means not only to be full, but to be submerged. Submerged underwater. And you see the determinative of the wavy water lines in the Medutu and so forth. It can mean to be submerged. It can also mean submerging in the sense of immersion, but also submerging in the sense of drowning. As related to a group of people can be those who have drowned or those who have been submerged. It can also have to do with a mass of water, the water flood, because the flood is submerging or causing the land to be submerged. It is also a title of a priest. It's also a title of Ausar, when Ausar is submerged underwater. Why are they talking about Ausar being submerged underwater? So when you look at the Shabaka text, as well as the pyramid text when they talk about Set killing Ausar and Ausar being submerged underwater. That's part of that process at the region of Nedat and so forth. And eventually he is resurrected. Let's look at the Shabaka text, which comes from the late period of ancient Kemet during the time of the Ainsu Shabaka. This particular text, when you look at the Shabaka, it's called the Shabaka text because the Ainsu, the king, the Ptah, so-called pharaoh Shabaka, discovered this particular text, and this is what it says, as a matter of fact, in the text itself. This writing was copied out anew by His Majesty, talking about Shabaka, in the house of his father Ptah, south of his wall, the deity Ptah. For His Majesty found it to be a work of the ancestresses and ancestors, which was worm-eaten, so that it could not be understood from the beginning to end. His Majesty copied it anew, so that it became better than it had been before, in order that his name might endure and his monument last in the house of his father Ptah, south of his wall, throughout eternity, as a work done by the son of Ra, Shabaka, for his father Ptah, Tanin, so that he might live forever. So the Ainsu, or the sovereign, the king, Shabaka, came across this text that was worm-eaten on a written down, but it was worm-eaten because it was an old text. He saw the value of this ancient text, and then he decreed that the text be recopied down on a stone so it could be preserved and endure for eternity, so that his name might live for eternity but so that the ancestresses and ancestors' words will be preserved for an enduring period. And so he had it copied on a stone so it would last. Of course, over 2,700 years later, the stone is still here, and we can still learn from it exactly, which is exactly the purpose for which he recopied, in order that it be recopied so it could last for his posterity, which is us, Afurakani people now. So, in that particular text, they talk about the cosmology of Ptah. They talk about Atem, Heru, Tehuti, the different divinities, the fashioning function of Ptah, and a number of different things. Talking about Heru and Set. And when Heru and Set were in contention, and the divinity Geb, who governs the crust of earth, the father of Ausar, adjudged that Heru would be the one who receives the inheritance of Ausar, so that he would inherit the rulership of the nation and so forth. All those different things are talked about, but there's a specific piece near the end that's talked about that we want to read, which is directly related to what we're talking about. So after they talk about how Ptah fashions the various forms and shrines in creation, and talking about Ptah, he gave birth to the divinities, he made the towns, he established the Sepat, or the gnomes, as we talked about the other night. He placed the deities in their shrines, he settled their offerings, he established their shrines, he made their bodies according to their wishes. He's the divine fashioner of various aspects of creation, the different features of earth, mountainous regions, riverine areas, deserts, fertile lands, and so forth, but also fashioning the sacred shrines of the deities within nature, their natural shrines, but also fashioning the shrines in the temples and so forth. Under the direction of Ptah, we fashion specific shrines for the deities and so forth, so that the deities can take up residence. So he says he made their bodies according to their wishes, the deities. Thus the deities entered into their bodies of every wood, every stone, every clay, everything that grows upon him, in which they came to be. So when we fashion specific shrines with stone, or with certain kinds of wood for the deities, or certain kinds of clay or different stones or whatever, then the spirits enter into those shrines so they can communicate directly with us. So when we set up shrines in our homes or in our shrine houses and so forth, and we have sculptures and different things under the direction of the deities according, quote unquote, to their wishes or specifications, when they are fashioned properly, then the Abosom, the Orisha, the Bodu take up residence in those shrines and so forth. We've done a broadcast on this Shabaka text in detail, so we just want to go over that very quickly. And he says, thus in the text, thus were gathered to Ptah all of the deities and their Ka and Kaet, their Kau and Kaitu, or their souls and so forth, content united within the master of the two lands. Now, here's the piece that we want to talk about tonight. The great throne that gives joy to the heart of the deities in the house of Ptah is the granary of Ptah-Tenen, the mistress of all life, through which the sustenance of the two lands, meaning northern and southern Kemet, is provided. Owing to the fact that Ausar was drowned or submerged in his water, Auset and Nebuchadnezzar looked out. They beheld him, meaning Ausar, and attended to him. Heru quickly commanded Auset and Nebuchadnezzar to grasp Ausar and prevent his drowning or submerging. They heeded in time and brought him to land. He entered the hidden port in the glory of the masters of eternity, in the steps of him who rises on the horizon on the waves of Ra, the great throne. He entered in the palace and joined the deities of Ptah-Tenen, Ptah, master of years. Thus Ausar came into the earth at the royal fortress to the north of the land to which he had come. His son Heru arose as king of Upper Kemet, arose as king of Lower Kemet, in the embrace of his father Ausar and the deities in front of him and behind him. So, Ausar was being, his body, after having been mummified and so forth, set down the body and tried to have it submerged and so forth. It was in the water. Auset and Nebuchadnezzar grasped and attended to Ausar so that he would not drown and be lost and so forth. They grasped him along with Heru, brought him out of the water, brought him out of the submerging, or the quote-unquote drowning, but submerging, and then they brought him to land. After they pulled him out of the water, the mummified body out of the water, he entered the hidden portals in the glory of the masters of eternity, in the steps of him who rises in the horizon on the waves of Ra, the great throne. They're talking about Ra operating through the Aten, the sun, rising in the horizon. Ausar follows after Ra, after he's brought out of the submergence, out of the waters. He entered the palace and joined the deities of Ptah-Tenen, Ptah, Lord of years, Master of years. Thus Ausar came into the earth at the royal fortress to the north of the land to which he had come. We just said Meh means north. Meh also means submergence. Meh is a title of Ausar, the one who submerged. Meh is also a title of a priest. So when you see Heru, Auset, and Nebuchadnezzar retrieving the body of Ausar, the mummified body of Ausar that has been mummified and purified so that it is impregnable, impenetrable with regard to worms and maggots and so forth, the body is preserved and crystallized. It becomes an ancestral shrine, the greatest ancestral shrine for the spirit of the person who inhabited the body. That's why we engage in this process of mummification, to enshrine or crystallize the physical body, so it's a great magnet for the spirit of the individual, so that when we pour libation or engage in ritual practice, the spirit will be drawn back to that crystallized shrine, the physical body they used to inhabit, magnetically drawn back to that great shrine, and we communicate with the people, with the ancestor or ancestress, when they come down and possess and communicate with us. So this is why we have this mummification process. We've dealt with that in previous broadcasts in detail. But when that purified body is drawn out of the water, out of the submergence, Meh, then the body is Mehi, the one that was in the water submerged, but now it's resurrected, quote unquote, from the water. And then he comes into earth at the royal fortress to the north of the land. So the northern land, when they talk about earlier in the text that Ausar was drowned in his water in the region at the division of the two lands, the southern Kemet, upper Kemet is one region, northern Kemet is the other region. Northern Kemet includes the delta where the water fans out into like a triangular structure, and that land becomes well watered because there are a number of tributaries of the river that spread out into the land and so forth. that land becomes submerged or well watered or flooded and so forth. That is the northern area. That's the land that Asar comes into the earth and then goes into the glory following Ra into the heavenly realms and so forth into the northern land. This is where the judgment was taking place, and Heru was adjudged to be king of first southern Kemet, but then also gave him northern Kemet, the Mehi land or the northern land as well, and therefore Asar comes into earth to the north of the land, in the northern territory, in the Meh territory. So they resurrect Asar, pull him out of the northern land, or he pulls him out of the water, places him in earth, and then he comes out of earth and goes into the heavenly regions with Ra. Meh means submerging. Meh means a priest. Meh means ritual submersion as well. So what are we talking about with regard to this ritual submersion? When we go underwater, that's akin to initiation. Water is the gateway to the spirit realm. Water is the gateway to the ancestral realm, the spirit realm, but water is also a gateway to the initiatory process. In the Akhan tradition and in various other traditions, you have Abosom as well as ancestral spirits that will take you as a spirit underwater, literally as a spirit underwater, to communicate and teach medicine, teach ritual practices and so forth. You'll find this in the various traditions. One of the popular things that you will find in the Akhan tradition is the Mwatia, the so-called dwarf spirits, ancient ancestral spirits, taking people into a river and underwater at the bottom of the river and communicating ritual practices, teaching medicine and so forth. So when they emerge from the water, they have that ritual knowledge of medicinal properties of plant life as well as mineral life and so forth, and they can come forward and heal. We deal with spirit possession, spirit communication, but they're taking you underwater. That's not only in the Akhan tradition, but the various traditions wherever we exist, not only on the continent of Africa, but also in the Western Hemisphere, in North America, for example, in the Hoodoo tradition, Akhan ancestral religion, the Nsamanfo, our ancestresses and ancestors, will take us underwater spiritually and teach us medicine, teach us divination. So when we emerge from that ritual space, then we have learned these ritual processes, and then we engage the divinatory process for the people in the community. That's always been part of the Hoodoo tradition, the same as in the Juju tradition, which is Yoruba, Voodoo tradition, which is Eve and Fon, and so forth. These are unbroken traditions. It goes back to this original process when Ausar is mummified, purified, submerged under the water, and then pulled out of the water, resurrected, purified, impregnable, impenetrable, and so forth, and then goes into the heavenly realms connected with Ra, the Creator, as well as Ra, the Creatress, and manifests that power that he receives as a result of going under the water, being submerged, and so forth. Heru, Aset, and Nebuchadnezzar, when they're retrieving him from the water, when they're retrieving Asar, Meh, or Mehi, the submerged one, from the Meh, or Mehi, the flooded waters, and so forth, they are functioning as Meh, or Mehi, those priests and priestesses. This is why a title of a priest or a priestess in this context is Mehi, the kind of priest who facilitates that Mehi function or Mahi function, that submergence, that taking one in the initiatory process, going under. This is where this notion of going under, when you're going through an initiatory process in the real sense, you're going under, meaning going under, quote unquote, the water. Now, when you look at, just before we get further, when you look at the etymological origin of the term baptism, and of course we know when you look in, the pseudo-religions of Christianity, Islam, and so forth, Judaism, you're seeing the people being wrapped up very often in a white cloth like a mummy. Then they're being immersed or dunked in the water, submerged, mehi or mahi, and then they're drawn out of the water and they're purified. And now, just like in the foolish text of the Bible, once the fictional cartoon character Jesus was baptized, immersed in the water, and quote unquote pulled out of the water, then quote unquote the heavens opens up and they the spirit of the fake creator comes down like a quote-unquote dove and so forth and says this, alights upon the head of the fictional cartoon character and says, this is my son, and I am well pleased, with whom I'm well pleased, and all that nonsense. And they're talking about Asar emerging from the water, the mummified figure wrapped in white cloth, bandages and so forth, coming out of that purificatory process by the male and female priests, the Mehi priests and priestesses, Heru, Aset, and Nebuchadnezzar, being pulled out of the water. Then he enters into the earth in the north of the land, in the Mehi land, the submerged land, the delta region, the Mehi land that's fully watered and so forth. And then he goes into the heavens to be with Ra, the one who's coming out of the horizon. That means the illuminated one, the creative power with the illuminated sun and so forth that sets upon the deity and says, this is the one with whom I am well pleased. This is where they stole the entire story from. But they don't have a cosmological foundation for it. They don't have a cosmological foundation for Mehi or Mahi, the priest, who's the one who engages the immersion process, the initiatory process to take one under, teach that medicine, and then pull them out. Here we have the term baptized. What does the term baptized mean? From the Greek baptizein, meaning immerse, dip in water. Also figuratively, and you get this on Etym online, but any etymological dictionary will show this. Figuratively, to be over one's head, in debt, etc., but to immerse, dip in water, to be soaked. In Christian use, baptized from baptine, to dip, steep, dye, color. Then they say perhaps, from the Proto-Indo-European root, guab or guaba, meaning to dip, to sink. They say perhaps is from guab, so baptize or baptine, from the root ba or guaba, meaning to dip or sink. They say perhaps because they don't know the root. All they know is guab or guaba means to dip or to sink or to immerse in water. It has something to do with somebody being immersed in water. It has something to do with someone being immersed by an individual who's taking them through some kind of process. It has something to do with spirituality. Guaba, meaning that to dip or to sink or immerse, but they don't know why, so they say perhaps. But that guaba comes from the ma or me. And when you look in ancient Kemet as well as the Akhan language, the M medut or the M hieroglyph is sometimes interchanged with the B because the M and B interchange linguistically. You have that in the Akhan language. You have terms that begin with M, but sometimes B. So you have moja for blood spelled with an M. Sometimes it's pronounced with a B, moja, and so forth. In ancient Kemet, for example, the ancient city of Meroe, or Meroe, in ancient Kanat, ancient Nubia, is spelled with the hieroglyph for the medut for the M, Meroe, but it's also written with the hieroglyph for the B. Berel in Coptic, sometimes it's spelled with the B. Berel or Berel, we, is also written with the M. Merelwi or Mero in Greek, they translate it or transliterate it as Mero with the M. But it's used with the B, Bero or Berel, and it's also Merel with an M. You have the same thing with ma, mba, or mbe, which is the term for submergence. This is where they get guaba in Proto-Indo-European to dip or to sink. They don't know the origin. They just know the term or the sound mba or guaba or mba means to dip, to sink, to immerse. And then that becomes mbaptine, which is baptine or baptism later, and so forth. They don't know why mba or guaba means to dip or to sink, to immerse. They don't know why it has to do with someone taking somebody through that, because there's no cosmological foundation in the Proto-Indo-European language phylum for that. But we have the entire story. We have the entire cosmology. The mba or the mbe is the priest or priestess who engages the mbe or the mba, the immersion function, or the deity, who's called AUSAR MEHI, the one who is submerged in the water, purified, mummified in the white wrappings and so forth, and resurrected, pulled out of the water, and then when he's pulled out of the water, enters into the sacred fortress on earth in the northern land, the well-watered land, and then he goes up into the heavenly realm in the footsteps or the following of Ra, the one who's illuminated through the Aten, the sun, and this is why that illumination also purifies. He's purified through the water first, then he goes into the heavenly realm and is purified through fire. And this is why they talk about a baptism with water, and then later there's going to be a baptism with fire, which is nonsense as well. So, but both of those things are connected within the cosmology of our people. Now let's go further to our book, KAMIT, HENA, NTORO, the Black Nation and Divinity, to get even further context, because we want to talk about the divinity Sobek, the crocodile divinity swimming through the primordial waters and also the waters of the Hop River, the quote-unquote Nile River and so forth. Crocodiles swim in the river. They can go underwater and stay underwater for hours, and then eventually they re-emerge. And when they're underwater for hours, it appears that they have quote-unquote died. But then hours later, you see that the head and nose and eyes of the great entity re-emerge, and it's akin to a resurrection. So, if we go to page 13 of our book, we begin to get into this information, that connection between AUSAR MEHI and the deity Sobek. Now, in the cosmology of ancient KAMIT, when the river Hop, so-called Nile, floods the entire country, and Nile comes from Nayar, in ancient KAMIT it becomes Nayal or Nile in English and so forth. When the river Hop floods the entire country, the waters begin to recede after a number of months. What is left behind when the water recedes is the black soil deposited on the banks of the river. This is KAMIT, the black soil left behind. And we talked about Kam meaning black in the language of KAMIT, but Kam also meaning finished, that which is left behind. And we showed that the exact same terms in the Akhan language as well. This is what we're talking about in the book. We show the etymology and cosmology of the term KAMIT, as well as NTORO, or so-called netter, and we were talking about that earlier in the book, and we're just reviewing that here in this paragraph. This is KAMIT, the black soil left behind. This is the body of Kam-Or, the great Or-Kam, black one. That is a title of AUSAR, whose body was, quote-unquote, left behind Kam after being drowned in his water, as we read in the Shabaka text. However, the black soil is the rich, fertile soil, as opposed to the infertile, red desert sand of Set. And Set is shown as a divinity, sacred color is red, sometimes with red skin, Deshert, the red one, but that term red, Desher, is the origin of the term Deshert, which means red land, which is the desert. The black soil is fertile because the fire energy of Ra and Ra'et, the creator and creatress, who use the sun, Aten, Atenita, as a transmitter of their divine energy, is moving within the black soil. It is literally the fire within. And we talk about Jam or Kam, meaning the fire, Ja or Ka, within. And that agglutination is Kam or Kamet, Kemet or Jama. In Akhan, also Kama, which means the same thing. We show the exact same meaning in both languages. The fire of Ra and Ra'et will resurrect AUSAR so that he can impregnate Set, who will give birth to Heru. The green vegetation, life will emerge from the black soil as Heru rises out of the Seshen, the lotus. You see an image of the baby Heru with his finger in his mouth and so forth, rising out of a Seshen, a lotus plant. That is that green, those green shoots that are sprouting from the black soil. And the river water and black soil when Auset is connected to the river water and Ausar operating through the black soil, that's a fertilization process, and then the green sprouts arise from that Heru, the solar energy within the plants and so forth, rising out of the plants and so forth. You see little Heru rising out of the Seshen, the lotus plant and so forth. Ausar becomes fertile when he receives the fire of Ra and Ra'et. So the black one, Kam-Ur, becomes fertile when he receives the fire from Ra and Ra'et. Ausar goes from being called Kam-Ur, the great black, to Watch-Ur, the great Watch, green one. And then we say, see the pyramid text of Teti for Kam-Ur and Watch-Ur as titles of Ausar. So we show Ausar with his black skin as Kam-Ur. We also show Ausar with his green skin as Watch-Ur, going from that black fertile soil to that green fertility, that renewal and so forth, coming out of the black soil. Now, and we also show that in the Akhan tradition, for example, AUSAR, AUSIR, AUSI, governing Sunday, AUSIDA, operating through the sun. The sun is a star, of course. Stars are considered black bodies, made of that primordial black substance, and the energy is enlightening or illuminating that black substance and is quote-unquote burning and so forth. But our star is considered, because of its properties, a green star, so there's a connection between the green energy as well as the black body, talking about black body radiation and so forth. This is the connection between Ausar operating in harmony with the Ra, as Ausar, Ra, operating through Sunday as the day of the sun. He's shown as black. He's also shown as green. Now, we deal with that in our book, Akharadi and Abosom, Volume 2. We just wanted to mention that. But the next piece is we show Ausar as Kam-Ur, the black one, the great black one. We show him as Watch-Ur, the great green one. It has to do with his fertility aspect and that death, but then that resurrection or renewal, which is the green aspect. Now, then we move and talk about the crocodile. And here's the relationship between the two, the direct relationship between the two, as well as the mehi or mahi, or quote-unquote baptism. We say, Odenchim da nsiomu nanso mframa, the crocodile lives in water but breathes air. That's an Akhan proverb. The crocodile swims with his nose, eyes, and tail above water, while the rest of his body is submerged. He lives in the water but breathes air, meaning he knows instinctively that he cannot breathe in the same manner as those who are in his present environment, fish. If he did so, he would drown. He must come out of the water to breathe and thus sustain his life by drawing from the air and the energy of the sun. Even when he goes underwater for hours at a time, at some point he must come up and emerge. He can't just live underwater like an octopus and so forth. So even though he's surrounded by others in his environment and they're all breathing underwater, he instinctively understands, or she instinctively understands, that as a crocodile, as an Odenchim, I must breathe air, even though everybody around me is operating in a different cultural fashion, even though we're in the same environment. And that's a lesson for Afurakani people. We are here in America surrounded by the whites and their offspring and their perverse culture, but if we seek to operate like they do, imitate their way of life, we will suffer from cultural asphyxiation, suffocation, and cultural death. We must instinctively operate according to our nature. The Odenchim, the crocodile, operates according to his or her nature. The other fish, all surrounding him or her, are breathing underwater. They operate differently, but he doesn't seek to follow them, or she doesn't seek to follow them. The Odenchim follows its instinct nature, understanding of its instinct nature, and will, although living in water, will breathe air, not water, and so forth. Now, we say he must come out of the water to breathe and thus sustain his life by drawing from the air and the energy of the sun. as the crocodile emerges from the flood water, the first sight of him appears to be the emergence of a black mound from the waters. This is the emergence of the the black land from the waters of the flood. So when the waters flood in ancient KAMIT, flood the land, when they begin to recede months later, first you see the primordial hill rising up as the waters are receding, the peak of the elevated mounds, that's the first thing you see. You see that black mound first peering out of the water and rising out of the water as the waters begin to recede. That's the first akin to the first black land, the first Ka'et, through which Afura and Afra had moved through in the beginning of creation. Of course, that's the origin of the term Afura Ka, the land of the creator, land of the creatress. But that first black land emerges, just like when the waters recede and the first site of the black soil begins to emerge when the waters are receding. In a similar fashion, when the crocodile has disappeared under the water, just like the land disappears for months in ancient KAMIT, then the waters begin to recede, and then you begin to see that black soil emerge. When the crocodile disappears under the water for hours at a time, and then he begins to re-emerge. First you see the nose and the eyes and the top of the head, and you see a black figure emerging from the primordial waters. And that's akin to the primordial land rising up out of the primordial waters to be the first landmass of earth and so forth, or the landmass returning or resurrecting after the flood. The black one, Kam-Ur, resurrecting or arising out of the waters after the flood, after the Mehi or the Mahi. The crocodile deity Sobek carries the body of Ausar out of the water after the drowning or flooding. The emergence of the crocodile from the depths of the water is the emergence of the black land KAMIT, the primordial mound at the beginning of creation, and from the flood waters after the inundation. The black and greenish color of the crocodile references the black and green sacred colors of Ausar, the black soil giving birth to green vegetation based upon the fire within, Kam, or Kammu, Ka, or Jam, meaning fire, Mu, meaning within, Kammu or Kam, later KAMIT, the land, the black land, the fire within, the fire of Ra and Ra'et. Sobek is also called Sobek Ra, showing that he has the fire within. The term Kam, meaning black, based upon the burning of the charcoal, that Medut or hieroglyph showing the burning charcoal, having the fire within it. Charcoal has fire within it. And also meaning completion, to come to an end, also represented by the crocodile's tail and paw, the end of the body from front to back and the end of the body from top to bottom. So the term Kam is spelled with burning charcoal because it has fire within, and that charcoal becomes blackened because the fire is burning within it. Kammu, fire within. But then the crocodile's tail, the crocodile's paw is also utilized as a spelling for the term Kam, the end, coming to an end and so forth, completion and all of that. So we show that image, but what we show in the image is from the temple of Paraka, so-called Philae. Sobek, here the crocodile divinity emerging from the water. On his back is the mummified body of Ausar. So he's emerging from the water. He's emerging from the flood waters, the Mahi or Mehi. He's bringing Mehi or Mahi, Ausar Mehi, the submerged one, out of the waters. And we show that image there. So what's taking place is the transition from that ritual of initiatory practice, going under, being submerged, receiving what you need to receive. A purification takes place within that submergence or that learning of that initiation, that teaching. Then you emerge as that mummified body out of the primordial waters or the ritual waters, the purification waters and so forth. You're brought out by that energy of the divinity, that spiritual force of Sobek. He draws you out of the waters intact. He's a protective divinity, so he protects that purified body, but he draws you out of the water. And then after he's drawn out of the water by Sobek, then Heru, Aset, Nebuchadnezzar, they grasp him and bring him to earth in the northern land, the Meh land, the Mehi land, the north. And then once he's brought forward in the north, the well-watered land and so forth, that purified land, then he goes up into the heavenly realm with Ra, and he's illuminated and empowered and fired and so forth, and receives that purification, purificatory fire as well. So we show that information there. Then we say on page 18, this black or green entity rising up from the soil is AUSAR, the great black one, Kam-Ur, and the great green one, Watch-Ur, being resurrected. He is pulled up by Heru, Auset, and Nebuchadnezzar after he had drowned in his water, meaning being submerged as shown in the Shabaka text. Like the black or green vine, because Kam also means vine in ancient KAMIT, but it also means the same thing in the Akhan language, that vine or that climbing plant. Like the black or green vine, he grasped onto Heru, Auset, and Nebuchadnezzar in order to rise up from the soil. He then entered into the heavenly realm to connect with the Ra, the Creator, who operates through the Aten, the sun. And then we quote from the text that we read earlier from the Shabaka text. That we show, as we show in our publication, Kuku Tuntun, the ancestral jurisdiction, the deity AUSAR is the spirit animating the black soil substance Kam. He is deposited on the banks of the river. After the inundation flooding, his body is what is left behind. Heru, Auset, and Nebuchadnezzar, as far as the mummy left behind and so forth, his spirit rises out of the mummified body and so forth. Heru, Auset, and Nebuchadnezzar were able to retrieve the body of AUSAR with the assistance of the crocodile deity Sobek, who swam through the water to bring the Kam-Ur, the black one, to the river bank. The black/green one is then resurrected and climbs up to the heavens, because Kam also means the vine, climbs up to the heavens to sit in the boat of the Aten, the sun, wherein Ra resides. This is the foundation upon which the Greeks would later associate AUSAR with Dionysus, the god of the vineyard, as Osiris Dionysus, and they talk about Osiris Dionysus as the god of the vine and so forth. So in this text, we're showing how Kam means black. Kam means the fire within. That's why it means black. It's black because the fire is burning within. Kam also means to come to an end, complete that which is left behind, that black soil left behind and so forth. But it also means vine. So it's all connected cosmologically, which the whites and offspring never understood the connection between black, burning, charcoal, a vine, all these different things, but we showcase all of that. So that's that portion of the text there. So, hold on one second. We just want to make sure we didn't miss that other piece. Okay. So those are the connections between the two. And we also, as we talked about previously, Sobek not only retrieves the body of AUSAR, the purified body of AUSAR, after the submergence and so forth, the initiatory process, but he also retrieves the two hands of Heru that were cut off and thrown in the water. Sobek goes into the water to retrieve the hands of Heru so they can be brought back and utilized ritually as well. But the key here is AUSAR's Mehi, Mahi. He's the one who is submerged, not only in the quote-unquote death process, but also the initiatory process. We go into the spirit realm. When we transition, of course, at death, the physical body is embalmed, mummified, buried, and so forth. But then the spirit goes into the ancestral realm. So we go into the ancestral realm after the death process and connect with the non-insurmountable, the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors. But also through our life, we go into the ancestral realm, make forays into the ancestral realm, not only through the sleep state in many instances, but through the ritual state, through spirit possession, spirit communication, but also initiation. The hoodoo man, hoodoo woman, juju man, juju woman, wanga man, wanga woman, voodoo man, voodoo woman, Greek man, Greek woman, and so forth. Gullah Geechee man, Geechee woman, and so forth. When we engage in these ritual practices, and we connect with the ancestresses and ancestors, the water divinities as well as earth divinities and so forth, deities of fire and so forth, we go through the initiatory process, taken underwater and so forth. We are submerged. We go through the gateway of the ancestral realm, and water is the gateway. This is one of the reasons we use water gazing as a divinatory process. looking into the water after invoking the Abosom and the NHOMA and Samafo, the deities and ancestral spirits, and they show us when we gaze into the water what's taking place in the spirit realm. It's no different when you're engaged in that kind of divinatory process. When you invoke the Abosom, when you invoke the NHOMA and Samafo, when you gaze into the water, it's no different in reality, literally, than looking at a movie or looking at a YouTube video or something online. They show you what's taking place. That watery space becomes a gateway where you can peer into the ancestral realm, the realm of the deities, and find out what's taking place and what the querent needs and so forth. So that's one of the reasons water gazing is a major form of divination wherever we exist in the world. It is the gateway. So mehi or mahi meaning submergence. Mahi meaning drowning, submergence, flooding, but going under. Mahi also meaning the title of a priest or priestess who engages that initiatory process. Mahi also, of course, meaning the north. That's the land that's fully watered and flooded and so forth. That's the land from which AUSAR was resurrected, and then his spirit goes up into the heavenly realm of the Ra and Riot, where he receives that further purificatory fire. This is the origin of that baptism process. People being wrapped up in a white cloth, mummified and so forth, emerged or dunked or submerged underwater, pulled out, resurrected and so forth. But once that happens in the quote-unquote Christian tradition or even in the so-called Jewish tradition, it is really absolutely meaningless. It means absolutely nothing. Nothing happens with regard to the individual. It's symbol without substance. They have no knowledge of what they're doing. They just think it has something to do with purification, but they have not communicated with AUSAR. They have not communicated with Sobek. They have not communicated with Heru. They have not communicated with Offset. They have not communicated with Nebuhet. They have not communicated with any of these Abosom, these divinities who facilitate that process. When we are engaged in ritual process and initiatory purification through that submergence process, we communicate with these various divinities. They facilitate that process. And Tahuti is also given the title of Mehi because he participates in that process as well. So we communicate with these various divinities. We are informed by these various Abosom, Orisha, Vodou, and so forth, and they allow us to engage that healing process, whether we're learning medicine and so forth or learning forms of divination. They allow us to engage that process fully and directly with open eyes and so forth because we're invoking them and aligning ourselves with them. If you just go through some silly little baptism or some ablution in some little silly ritual, in some silly Hebrew ritual or Christian ritual or some pseudo-esoteric Gnostic ritual or Masonic ritual, it means absolutely nothing. If you can't invoke the Abosom, the Orisha, the Vodou, and evoke the ancestresses and ancestors, you are not doing anything. And none of these fake religions and their pseudo-esoteric iterations place you in that position to invoke the deities or evoke the ancestresses and ancestors. It is pure nonsense from top to bottom. So, this is the information we wanted to cover for tonight. Of course, this is all directly related to EGUA marketplace. We're talking about, when you talk about EGUA and marketplace and economic development, you're talking about ultimately the distribution of resources. Resources are material. They have to do with, plant life, animal life, mineral life, and so forth, these things that we need to sustain our mind. But they're also talking about intellectual resources, also spiritual institutions. These are resources. When you go to a priest or a priestess, hoodoo man, juju woman, conjure man, conjure woman, and so forth, and you're trying to learn what you need to learn to get yourself back in harmony with order, get your physical health back on track. If there's some spiritual agency that's causing you to be spiritually ill, that's not good for you. It's not good for your family and not good for your children. You don't want to lead to chronic illness or even death or, other negative circumstances and so forth. You need those spiritual resources The Abosom are the spiritual resources, the forces in nature, the different energy complexes that govern the different features of creation, whether it's plant life, animal life, mineral life, Afurakani, human life. These are the resources. Mineral life, the earth mother, the oceans, the rivers, and everything else, the spiritual forces that animate these aspects of creation. This is what we're dependent on for our lives. Physically, we're dependent on water. We're dependent on the earth mother. We're dependent on the, plant life, mineral life from the earth mother. We're dependent on the oxygen in the air and so forth, and the fire within the core of earth and from the sun and so forth. We're dependent on that for our existence. These are our resources. But we're also dependent, our spirit bodies, on the spiritual forces that animate the earth mother, the atmosphere, the rivers, oceans, fire, and so forth. And if we're out of harmony spiritually with these forces in creation, then we create disorder within our spirit bodies, disorder within our lives. So we need to get back in harmony with these resources. When we're talking about economic development, we're talking about it from a holistic understanding. Yes, we're talking about the distribution, equitable distribution of an allocation of physical resources and so forth, but also intellectual resources, institution building, establishing sound systems of governance and jurisprudence and so forth, a number of different things, a military structure, all these different aspects of nation building. We're talking about the allocation of resources as well, but we're also talking about those spiritual resources, how to harmonize with the different divinities. Part of that process is through the initiatory process. When things go wrong and we seek to engage the religious process, the ritual process of ritually incorporating divine law and ritually restoring divine balance, we're tapping into these spiritual economic resources. So this is part of that cosmological foundation for economic development. When we approach economic development, we do so from an ancestral religious perspective, a holistic perspective. Or else, when you don't approach economic development from a holistic perspective and don't understand the spiritual foundation of the allocation of resources in an equitable manner, then you become like the whites and their offspring, where you seek to hoard resources, concentrate them in the hands of a small few or elite, and everybody else is a servant or peasant struggling to make it, and they're serving the elite who are controlling all of the resources and rationing them out at their whims and so forth. We don't engage that kind of process in our culture because we have a spiritual foundation. We understand the distribution of power shown by the Abosom, the forces in nature, as their power is distributed through the fire, earth, air, water, and so forth, all aspects of creation. We see that within our physical bodies. We see the distribution of power through our organs and systems and so forth, and then we replicate that in our societal structure so we can distribute energy, power, resources for those within the society in a harmonious fashion. Okay, so we're going to check out if there are any questions or comments. Okay. Hold on one second. Okay, on the phone line, we have a question. On the phone line, if you have a question or comment, number 2081.
Yes, question. One question I have to ask, in regards to gazing the ocean, you mean like this, looking at the ocean in the outside or looking directly at the ocean? Like a pond, seeing your reflection. What do you mean by that? In regards to the connection.
Okay, so that's one part. That's one part of it. So when we're talking about water gazing, so for example, typically when people are engaged in the form of divination, which is water gazing, they'll have a vessel with water. It's ritually prepared through ritual invocation and so forth. And then when they sit down at the shrine and gaze into the water, they can see and communicate with the Abosom and NTORO and Samanfo. But of course, the first manifestation of that is when we would go to a ritual shrine in nature, a natural shrine of the Abosom in a river or the ocean or a lake or a pond or a stream or whatever. We can engage the same ritual process. When we go to a stream, we take ritual offerings. We give them to the Abosom that govern the stream. And this is even done just in general when we have our Okragwade or soul washing ceremony in the Akhan tradition. On our Krada, soul day, birthday, and so forth, going to the river that's governed by the Abosom and the Patriclan divinity, giving an offering to that divinity, and then communicating with that divinity through the water and so forth. For people who have that capacity and they have that function, yes, they can go to a river, give an offering and so forth, look into the water, and the Abosom will manifest, the NHOMA and Samanfa will manifest, whether it's a river, stream, ocean, and so forth. But typically when people are doing serving community as a diviner, and they use water gazing as their major form or one of their forms of ADEBISA or divination, yes, they're utilizing a vessel of water.
Okay. And another thing that I just came across, you did mention about the use of drugs. It seems to me that what has been discovered, that a lot of people that promote the smoking of marijuana are actually now showing forms of the effects of it. We're getting lung issues, getting cancer, or I assume have to breathe through a device. And one of them is, I think, a particular artist. In particular, has to breathe through a breathing tube now. And he's not even near his mid-30s yet. Well, it looks like this is the result of taking marijuana and smoking that you have talked about in previous broadcasts about the drug use. About if people think they're just going to get cancer from tobacco, they're sadly mistaken. They can get also with the marijuana, either synthetic or the natural. So I just want to point that out to you.
Absolutely, because of course the whites and offspring are promoting, which they had always planned to do at this particular time. First, they flooded our communities with, of course, heroin and cocaine and later crack cocaine and so forth. But they flooded our communities with marijuana in the 60s and 70s to hook our people on that drug for those who were not using the hard drugs where they were shooting up drugs in their veins and all of that. Some people were. There was a stigma against that. But if they can slide, number one, nicotine through regular cigarettes and cigars, but then marijuana as well as alcohol, those things were, quote-unquote, more acceptable and less invasive as far as the people could see. So they flooded our communities with marijuana in the 60s and 70s to destroy our bodies. We've talked about how marijuana and other drugs bind with that melanin molecule and they make us hooked quicker and stay hooked longer. They're destructive. There's more carcinogens in marijuana smoke than there are in regular cigarette smoke and so forth. The whites and their offspring, of course, put forward false studies talking about it's inconclusive whether or not marijuana, causes lung cancer. Of course, they know it does. This is why they promote it. First, they hooked us on it for a couple of generations by flooding our communities with it. Thousands and thousands and thousands of our people utilizing that nonsense on one hand and polluting themselves and disfiguring sperm cells and ovum cells and therefore making their children more susceptible to asthma and things like that generation after generation. At the same time, our people being locked up for selling it and using it and having it in our possession, generations being destroyed, families being separated, people suffering because of, incarceration and all of that. So after a couple of generations of our people suffering through incarceration because of it, possession and selling and so forth, and destroying the bodies of our people, and our people coming down with, lung cancer and everything else, and weakening the immune systems of the children that will be born and so forth, intergenerationally, after working to destroy a segment of our population for a couple of generations, then they decide, now we're going to make it legal, which they've always planned to do it at this time. They wanted to get a couple of generations of our people destroyed, as many people as possible, and then make it legal, make our people beg them to make it legal. First, they flood our communities with it. It destroys our people physiologically. Then we're being incarcerated for possession as well as distribution. And after we're incarcerated, and of course, at a greater, much greater ratio than the whites and their offspring with regard to the population and the usage and so forth, then we start talking about disparity in sentencing and arrests and so forth, and putting these figures forward and having protests and going before Congress and other politicians and so forth, talking about the unfairness within the justice system and drug use, and we need to stop the war on drugs because it's destroying black communities, which, of course, the whites and offspring know all of that because they put it in place. Next thing you know, we're begging them to make drugs legal after they've oppressed us with incarceration and polluted our communities. And once we beg them, as we've been conditioned to do, to make drugs legal, they act like they don't want to, but then bit by bit they, pass legislation, put out referendums and make the people believe that they're voting for this and asking for it, and then they make marijuana legal, which they're doing all across the country and so forth. And now they seek to make our people a generation of drug addicts. That's the goal, to destroy our melanin, destroy the sperm cells, ovum cells, and so forth, destroy the babies before they're even conceived, and, of course, before they're born. So we have to be intelligent and recognize the whites and their offspring are our absolute enemies. We have to understand divine order, which is comprised of Madanechi, divine law, love, and divine hate. When we understand that and recognize the spirits of disorder are to only be rejected, hated, then anything they put forward, any explanations they put forward, anything they talk about or promote amongst our people, we reject it automatically. And we only embrace things that we investigate ourselves. We do not go on the word of our absolute enemies, the spirits of disorder, who only have the capacity to promote disorder. So, yes, this is just a manifestation, as you said, of our people falling for that foolishness, and now they're seeing the results of that.
Indeed. And it's now always been revealed, but people never did understand until now. So it tells you no one should take nothing that they bring forth, period. Because all it does is going to lead to more destruction. That's what I want to bring to your attention. Thank you again, Doctor.
Okay, you now say that. We appreciate the call. Okay, so, all right, so there are only about 10 minutes left in the broadcast. Part of this process, when we're talking about Hiber-Nation, talking about submergence and so forth, and the crocodile going underwater of Hapi and so forth, once again, that's directly related to the recent broadcast we did last night, as well as last week and a couple weeks back on Hapi and Merit, the male and female forces that animate the inundation of the river of ancient Kemet. And, of course, that's directly related to our HAPI-MERIT Hiber-Nation retreat, which is coming up in 3 weeks, as a matter of fact. So that retreat on one of the Gullah Islands in South Carolina, Edisto Island, we have another space open, as we talked about last night. First, we had a couple of spaces because of cancellations. A couple of those spaces were taken and reserved over the past couple of days, so we have another space, one more space left. If you are interested in attending, it's 3 weeks away, so this is the last space. So if you would like to attend, go to our HAPI-MERIT page, ASAP. You can register to reserve that final space. You'll see all the information there on the website. Read through the page, the HAPI-MERIT page, that'll answer the questions that you have about the retreat and so forth. And you can get all the information there. If you have any other questions or comments or whatever, you can connect with us on Facebook, Kwesi Akhan on Facebook, Odwirafo Akhan on Facebook, as well as the regular website, odwirafo.com. We're also on YouTube as Odwirafo, Instagram as Odwirafo, Twitter as Odwirafo as well. So again, Yerase, we thank you for tuning into this broadcast, and Yebe Shiabio, we will meet again. That's up.